The 2025 elections are now in the books, and they were obviously, in case you were on another planet, really bad for the Republican Party and Donald Trump, which got me to thinking about Trump and the Republican Party and the hold he continues to maintain over the party, particularly the party's elected officials. And then I found this really interesting op-ed in the Washington Post by Jeff Flake. So for people who don't know Jeff Flake was a very conservative congressman from Arizona. He then got elected to the Senate, and he was one of the earliest voices in like 2015 who was warning the Republican Party about Donald Trump, essentially saying this guy is not a conservative, this is not our kind of guy. Those comments and Flake's high profile basically led to him being driven out of the Republican Party. He's no longer in that seat, although I would note Democrats now control that seat. So I'm not sure if that's a net gain for the Republican Party, but regardless. So Flake writes a piece. The headline is, "The Great GOP Migration Has Begun." I just want to read a little bit. He says, "In politics, migrations rarely happen all at once. They start quietly, one or two members of a herd moving towards safer ground while the rest pretend not to notice. But once the wind really changes, the movement becomes unmistakable. I believe that a migration has begun within the Republican Party." Now, I have been very interested in this too, which is that typically a lame duck president, which is what Donald Trump is, he can't run for another term constitutionally, you would see, particularly an unpopular lame duck president, right? Donald Trump's approval ratings are in the low 40s. You would see someone like that be a person that the Republican Party, elected officials, people in swing states and swing districts would back away from, right? They would try to get away from Donald Trump. You've not seen that, mostly because Trump enforces with an iron grip his sort of authority over the party. But I do want to go through a bunch of instances in which this has not been the case, where Donald Trump isn't getting his way, or at least there are more Republican members, elected officials in Washington, willing to break with Donald Trump than we've seen before. There are actually enough instances here that I think Jeff Flake is not just wish casting. I think there may be something to it. Before I do that, let me make a pitch to you. I want you to become a subscriber to my channel. I ask every single day because I'm always needing to grow, always wanting more people to be supporting what I do so I can keep doing it. Two words define me: independent and authentic. Independent. I am not tied to big corporate media. I am not tied to either party. I'm a free agent. I'm always going to give you my honest opinion, which leads to word two, authentic. Not in the fan service business. I am in the business of telling you what I honestly think is going on in American politics. I won't always be right. You won't always agree with me, but you'll know that it's coming from the heart. All right, let's get to it. So, as I said, there are a bunch of examples of Republican elected officials breaking with Donald Trump in ways we have not seen before. Let's go through them. So Donald Trump is obviously pushing of late the filibuster, getting rid of it. He wants to get rid of the legislative filibuster. You have seen Republicans, even after a meeting earlier this week with Donald Trump at the White House, express skepticism. John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, highest ranking Republican in the Senate, basically says it's not going to happen. Other Republicans are saying, well, I guess we'll see, but basically just trying to buy themselves time because they know it's not going to happen. So it is interesting. This is a thing Donald Trump very much wants. And I think it's very unlikely he's going to get it from this Republican Congress, which in and of itself is rare. I'll also note, outside of elected officials, the Wall Street Journal editorial board, which is quite conservative, has come out against the filibuster too. They wrote in an op-ed on Thursday, quote, "Republicans would be dumb and hurt the country by breaking the filibuster." So just to note that. All right, other examples of elected officials in the Republican Party breaking with Donald Trump. Rand Paul, Kentucky senator, has been very critical of Donald Trump on Venezuela, on the bombing of what Donald Trump says are boats filled with drugs, and on tariffs. Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of the kind of original MAGA members, Congresswoman from Georgia, has been critical of Donald Trump on the release of the Epstein files, and then of Republicans more broadly on healthcare and the government shutdown. Ted Cruz, who has latched himself to Donald Trump after being one of Donald Trump's main competitors in 2016, came out, just in case you forgot this whole kerfuffle, came out and said that Donald Trump and the FCC commissioner trying to shut down Jimmy Kimmel, the late night host, and keep him off the airwaves, set a really dangerous precedent. So there is some evidence here of what Jeff Flake is talking about. You are seeing a few Republicans break from the herd. Now, Flake's argument is, you started to see some of this movement, but the 2025 election is going to supercharge it because you saw Abigail Spanberger win by 15 in Virginia. You saw Mikey Sherrill win by 12 or 13 in New Jersey. You saw Prop 50 in California pass with 65% of the vote. You saw huge gains in the Virginia State Assembly, most of which I think are attributable to concerns about Donald Trump, energy in the Democratic base because they dislike Donald Trump deeply, and just independent swing voters not being happy that Donald Trump is still not doing what they believe he was elected to do, which is lower prices, whether that's housing prices, grocery prices, whatever. And so I think Flake's argument is that elections have consequences. We've seen it over and over again. That election and how bad it was for Republicans. I mean, there was a blue wave. Now, it was in a lot of blue states, right? Virginia, New Jersey, California, New York City, et cetera. But even in Georgia and Pennsylvania, which are not blue states, statewide Democrats crushed. In Georgia for Public Service Commission, which not a sexy job, but is a statewide role. And then all three Democratic state Superior Court justices, statewide roles, were retained in Pennsylvania. So again, it might not be a race you're paying attention to, but it does show that even outside of Democratic leaning states like Virginia and New Jersey and California, there was some evidence of a resistance to what Trump is selling. So Flake's argument is now is the time. Let me read a little bit more. Let's see. This is what Flake says, a little bit more from Flake. Without the president on the ballot, candidates who rely on grievance and spectacle will find it even harder to win statewide races. What we're witnessing then is not merely a tactical adjustment, but the early stages of a realignment. Politics abhors a vacuum, and as the president's hold weakens, space will open for traditional conservatives, those who still believe in limited government, open markets, and an America that leads through example rather than intimidation. Now, that feels a little wish-casty to me. I'm not sure we are going back to the 2012 version of the Republican Party. I think the Republican Party has been fully trumped, at least in sort of the national populism. I don't think we're going back to sort of, okay, we need a limited government and lower taxes, right? I think that that's different. I'll also note that while there's a little bit of break among elected officials with Trump on the Republican side, the Republican base is still very much with him. So there were a ton of polls released just before Tuesday's election. Let me just cite two. Washington Post ABC. Trump's approval rating is in the low 40s. Actually, it might be 39 in that poll. It's still 86% among Republican voters. In a CNN poll, came out right around the same time, another national poll, Trump's approval rating 40 or 41 overall, 84% among Republicans. Until those numbers dip significantly into the 70s, 78, 75, I'm not sure you're going to see a wholesale herd mentality of running away from Donald Trump. I don't know that you're ever going to see that in the Republican Party, at least in the near term, certainly before 2026. Do I expect there to be some candidates in swing districts and swing states who do their best to create some more distance than they have between themselves and Trump? Yes. Do I think Flake's prediction that we are on the edge of a herd migration where everyone, or at least most people in the Republican Party, break with Donald Trump? No. I think in order to understand why not, you have to understand that the base of the party still loves Donald Trump. I'm not even sure that's dependent on election results. If you're an elected official, that's a whole other thing. I mean, you have to worry about getting elected, so you have to do the kinds of things that are going to get you elected, and I think that will increasingly be breaking with Donald Trump. But if you are not, if you're just a base voter, I don't know if we're in the midst of kind of a sea change, a reformation, as Flake says. So it's something to think about. Do I think Donald Trump is potentially weaker today than he was 3 days ago? I do, because elections, at least at some level, have consequences. Do I think Donald Trump and Trumpism is on the fade and is going to start to disappear as old-timey George W. Bush conservatism re-rises, Jeff Flake conservatism re-rises? I'm very skeptical of that. All right, that's it for me today. As I always say, I hope that you hit that subscribe button, authentic and independent. I hope you like and comment on this video in particular. Helps me grow my following among people who aren't already subscribers, those unlucky few. And then last thing, be an evangelist for me. Tell people about why this channel is important, why you think it matters, and why they need to subscribe heading into the 2026 midterms. Okay, everybody, take care.